We're back at Left Coast Crime. Outliers Writing University is our sponsoring entity, and we're in the Outliers Writing University studios with the legendary Michele Drier, probably the queen of vampire stories, one of the few who has created an enduring metaverse. Michele, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. But I have to tell you my Anne Rice story. Years and years ago, I'm talking 45, there was a program called Young California Writers, the James T. Phelan Award. And that year, I put in a manuscript. And I didn't hear anything for probably 4 or 5 months. And I thought, well, okay. They sent it back, no comments. Anne Rice won that year for Interview with the Vampire. Now, I should have taken that probably as some sort of a sign, but it took me another 40 years before I started writing vampire books.
When did you start your series?
This first book came out in 2012.
And we're at book number what?
I'm at book number 12 now.
12 books. Wow.
Yeah.
So that is what? Wow, every year.
Well, I usually try and write 2 books a year because I also write traditional mysteries. And I've got 2 series in that. Plus, I have a standalone psychological medical drama. Medical experiment going wrong kind of thing.
How do you jump between genres so effectively?
Well, I tried at one point, and this was not a bright thing to do, at one point to try and write both books at the same time. Didn't work at all. So I spend a few months finishing up the vampire one. Then I go on to, and it write very back and forth. Right at the moment, I'm writing the 12th of the vampire, but I've still got outlined the 4th in the stained glass series. So, and then after that, I've got a couple of memoir things I think I'm going to write. I'm not quite sure. But when I get to 20 books, I'm going to say, go on a vacation somewhere. Good.
Get to 20 books. I want to get to 5. I'll tell you. Why vampires, Michele?
Well, I have a son-in-law who's interesting. I'll say that. And he writes, he reads fantasy like crazy. And when my first book was bought, it was a mystery. And I liked it. It's called Edited for Death, and it takes place in a newspaper. And he took my daughter and I out for a really nice dinner and said, congratulations on why don't you write a vampire book? And I went, I've never even read a vampire book. I have no idea what that is. And so he said, well, go into a bookstore. Look at the size of the vampire selection. Look at the size of the mystery selection. He's a marketing person. And I said, okay. So I went in and I said, I read Charlene Harris and I read Jim Butcher and I remember, 4 or 5 different. And I went, these are romances. Probably I could write these. Because I didn't know the first thing about vampires, and then I started watching some of the True Blood things. And I thought, yeah, okay. So the first one, I started out with the idea that I would have a vampire family from Hungary, not actually from Romania, but from Hungary, who lived in the Carpathian Mountains for 500 years. And I didn't know how to tie them together to current times. And my daughter said, put them in Hollywood. Everybody there wears dark glasses. Their limos are all tinted. They only go out at night. They could all be vampires for what we know. And I went, okay then. So I came up with this family of vampires who have cornered the market on international gossip journalism, sort of Rupert Murdoch of gossip journalism, and they're worldwide, but they're headquartered in L.A. The family, it lives in a castle in Budapest. And clearly, they are character-driven rather than plot-driven, but they're a little wry. I kind of think of them as Twilight for grown-ups. There's no teenage angst or anything. These are all professional people, and the two main protagonists are vampires, 2 males, and the 2 female protagonists are 21st century L.A. professional women. They're all from the publishing or the entertainment section, and of course, you know what's going to happen with that. They pair up. But that has issues in and of itself, because if they hook up with a vampire, what do? They either remain a regular, quote unquote, and they're going to age out and look really dreadful when the vampire is 600 years old, or they're going to allow the vampire to turn them so they can have a lifetime together. So that kind of tension probably is the underlying story arc for the first 6 or 7 books. And now I moved into a little bit of international intrigue because the vampires have so much money that they are able to manipulate disinformation, particularly in Eastern Bloc countries. So It's been really interesting, and I'm very fond of them. Although mysteries are still in my heart, but these guys are just very cool, and they're very sexy.
Michele Drier is our guest. Her website is micheledrier.com. I want to talk about resurrection.
.me.
Oh, .me.
Yeah,
Yep.
sorry.
Okay. I have a eye appointment in a week.
Well, I will tell you a little story about that. It was .com for a long time. I tried to renew the license. Some attorney whose name is not Michele or anything else took that. And so now when you do that, there's some firm of unknown attorneys. Okay, then.
I wonder if they're vampires.
So, sorry.
Before all of this, you were a journalist.
Yes.
What made you make the transition to writing full time?
Oh, my. I've sort of written all my life. When I was with the Mercury News, and this is years ago, like a lot of my compatriots, I have a half-finished novel in my drawer, and I kept thinking, well, I really would I don't know if I can write a novel, and what I really worried about was writing dialogue. I could interview people, and I could write stories. That was not a problem, but I did not know how to consistently write dialogue, write characters that would carry the plot along. And I think I always thought in terms of characters rather than plot. And after I left that journalism career, I did a few other things. I came back into journalism, worked for McClatchy for a while. And then I took a job as the executive director of a legal organization for senior citizens in the Bay Area in Oakland. And we had about 10,000 clients. And I had, 6, 8, 10 attorneys on my staff, something like that. And when I retired from that, I thought, if you're ever going to write a book, you better get your butt in the chair and sit down and write a book. And so I finished up the very amorphous idea I had originally. And then I found a writing coach, and she helped me a lot. And after I was finished, quote unquote, she said, now, wasn't that fun? It's going to be so much easier the next time. And I thought, lady, you're crazy. I'm not going through this again. But that turned out to be the first of a 3-book series.
And you were off and running.
I was off and running. And then my son-in-law with the vampires, was like, oh my God. No, yeah.
So before we go, let's talk a little bit about your latest stained glass mystery, Resurrection of the Roses. Without giving away spoilers, give us a brief overview of that amazing story.
Well, this is actually, at this point, a 3-book series, and I've got the 4th in mind. The protagonist in this is a stained glass artist who does massive construction pieces internationally. She does malls, she does churches, she does cathedrals, and she's internationally known. She's married to the art historian at UCLA who was killed in a drive-by shooting in a place where they never go. And so if the police, of course, look at her as a person of interest. And she's tired of all this. She moves up to the Oregon coast, and about 3 weeks into her sojourn up there, she goes out her door, and the entire sky is lit up red and blue because all the first responders in town are across the street hauling her neighbor's body out. And so she's going, what is all of this? So she ends up kind of an amateur sleuth, The second book in that series takes place on the south coast of England, and the third book, Resurrection of the Roses, takes place primarily in France. She's traveling with her now boyfriend, who is a wine journalist. So, of course, he's, showing all over the wineries. And she is the keynote speaker at a conference on medieval glass at the Sorbonne. And when she goes into the Sorbonne to kind of scope the place out, she sees this lump of red on the stage, and she doesn't know what it is. She looks at it, and it's a shard of blood-red stained glass impaled into this guy's body. So once again, she stumbled over a body. And I had I've had a few people who were like, I had one more woman said, this is like a travelogue. And I said,
it is.
Cool. That's fine with me. Yeah.
It's got a beautiful cover too, Michele. Who did your cover for you?
Karen Phillips does all my covers. And if anybody is looking for a cover artist, she does Terry C. I recommend her.
Our guest, Michele Drier. I'm going to get the website right this time. micheledrier.me. It's been great.
Thanks, Larry. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Wonderful to have you here with us here in the Outliers Writing University studio at Left Coast Crime.